Hi folks, I'm Craig Taylor, and as always a huge thanks for joining me here on my YouTube channel, the Bushcraft Padawan. Cordage. If I'm being honest, it's something that I pay lip service to. I always carry a decent length of it round hanked up in my trouser pocket. If I'm going out for a long period of time, I may even take out a roll of it and carry it in my pack on my back. But I'm very conscious that it is easily expended and not so easily renewed. That's why I'm always keeping my eye out for ways to be able to source and to be able to procure and find cordage either in a raw state or in a state that needs to be processed from my surroundings themselves. Now I've toyed with using, spruce roots in the past, and they've all worked very well. However, I was flicking through a copy of the Bushcraft Journal a few weeks ago, and I stumbled upon an article written by Stephen Lacey, who was talking about using rawhide to create cordage, and just how strong and how durable and how long he was able to use a single piece of this rawhide cordage. And it piqued my interest. So I popped round to his house, because he literally lives about a mile and a half from where I'm standing right now. He lives very close to me. So I popped round to his house, and he very kindly gave me a piece of this rawhide. I can't promise that I won't do that again during this video, but I popped round and he very kindly gave me this piece of rawhide that you can see on camera now. So I thought to myself, why don't I go away, why don't I actually put the rawhide that he's given me, why don't I use that? Why don't I use the guidance that he provided in that magazine article and actually replicate it out here in the woods and see how I get on myself. So for the rest of this video, you're going to see me taking this quite hard, sturdy, doesn't lend itself to thinking that it could be cordage, piece of rawhide, and hopefully process it into a nice, soft, flexible, durable, hard-wearing piece of cordage. Let's see how I get on. The first thing that Stephen suggests doing is to cut a circle out of the rawhide 6 to 8 inches in diameter. Now it just so happens to be that this billy can insert is 6 inches in diameter, so that's quite convenient. I'm going to trace around this just using a pencil so that I've got a nice clean line to work from. I'm trying to keep the billy can as close to the natural edge of the rawhide as I can, so I'm not wasting any. And there we can see, hopefully you can see, if I get it in camera, you can see that circle, there we go, you can see that circle that I've drawn on there using the billy can insert. I'm now going to proceed to cut this out. The photographs in Stephen's article shows him cutting this out using his knife. However, I'm going to cheat a little. I'm going to use these small pair of nail scissors. I carry these anyway. These are normally carried in my medical kit for cutting nails, but also they're multi-purpose, of course. A pair of normal nail clippers can really only cut nails, whereas a pair of small scissors can not only cut nails, but you can multitask them for other things like cutting out circles of rawhide. So for this first example, I'm going to make life as easy as I can for myself, and I'm going to use these scissors. But when I utilise this rawhide for more cordage in the future, I'm going to try using my knife. There we have my finished circle. Next step of this is to start cutting inwards from the outer edge in a spiral towards the centre of the circle, leaving strips of about 1 centimetre in thickness. So that's what I'm going to start doing now, working from the outer edge to the inner point, cutting out a ribbon, if you like, a strand of about 1 centimetre width. So this is where I've got to, folks. There was the circle, and you can see that I've cut this spiral effect out all the way into the middle, about 1 centimetre in width. Sometimes a little wider, sometimes a little smaller than 1 centimetre in width. Clearly need to get my eye in with that. But there we have What do I do with this now? Well, I take this and I soak it in water for anywhere between a couple of hours to overnight. I'm going to go for the overnight option, and then I'm going to join you once again back here tomorrow. I'm going to take this out of the water and I'm going to show you what the next stage of this process is for turning this rawhide into cordage. Join me in a few seconds. Here I am, folks, only a few seconds later, but in real time. I'm actually about 24 hours since that last clip has passed by. What's happened in 24 hours then? Well, that rawhide has been soaking in the water. Let me show you this piece of rawhide. This piece that I chopped up or cut into a spiral previously in the video. Here we have it here. You can see much more flexible, much more cord-like. Looks like a damn tapeworm, doesn't it? But look at this. I've done a terrible job of cutting this up. I think it's way too thick in terms of the strand, but also the thickness. The piece of rawhide that I selected was like a slab of beef. Very, very thick indeed. So what I've done off camera, let's just put that to one side for now. What I've done off camera yesterday evening was I cut a bigger circle of rawhide out. When I was cutting the spiral effect into the centre, I took my time doing this. I used a sharper pair of scissors and I cut it slightly thinner. This is what we've got here. We've got a longer tapeworm. Let me take this out. There we can see we've probably got about 8 or 9 foot there. And we can see, if I hold that up to camera, I've done a better job of cutting it out. It's thinner, but I've also picked a thinner piece of rawhide itself, so it doesn't feel as difficult to work with. According to Stephen's article now, what I should do with this is this has been soaking, by the way, for probably, let me think, it's midday now, 12, about 14, 15 hours this has been soaking, so still plenty of time, definitely overnight and then some. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to stretch this between my hands, and as I'm stretching it I'm also naturally going to be expunging or forcing out a lot of the water content from this. So that's what I'm going to move on to now. Now I've tried doing this previously off camera. This stuff is very, very slippery. It's like trying to wrestle an eel. So what I've actually found is if I put a tea towel or a rag in either hand and use that to help pull it apart, it gives me a better grip, it gives me a better purchase, it allows me to stretch it further, soaks up some of the moisture from this as well. So that's what I'm going to do now. A couple of tea towels. Mrs. won't have a problem with this at all, I'm sure. Just going to start at one end of this. There. Grip that in the tea towel. Grip the other, and I'm just going to gradually, not wishing to stretch too much at a time, maybe 6 to 8 inches at a time, just pulling that through the tea towel. Could use anything, could use a glove I guess, could use a bandana, piece of material. As long as it's something that gives you a decent purchase and doesn't slip, I'm sure that would work. We can just see now, if I let you focus in on that, we can see that this is becoming very, very pliable, very cord-like, much thinner in texture. In fact, if I keep that in front of the camera, you'll probably notice that being able to constrict and expand as I'm putting tension on it. And I'm just helping to stretch it out, taking a lot of that moisture out while I'm doing this. And I'm going to do this 2 or 3 times. I'm going to use a dry piece of cloth each time so that I'm not re-wetting the cordage, re-wetting the rawhide. And I'm going to do this another 2, 3, maybe 4 times until I can't feel any more give in the cordage. I've stretched it as far as I can. and that no more moisture is being forced out as well. So join me back in a second once I've pulled this through a few more times. Having now pulled this rawhide through those rags 3 or 4 times, it feels much drier. The rags are on the floor over there, they're absolutely soaking wet, so clearly forced a lot of moisture out. Yes, if I really attempt to squish this, it still feels slightly damp, but don't worry, we'll be drying it out very shortly. One thing I wanted to draw your attention to is this. If you look at the consistency of the thickness of that piece of rawhide there, it's relatively consistent. Yet there's a few little bumps here and there, but it's a relatively consistent thickness. And then every now and then you get an anomaly like that or like that. So Stephen's article suggests very carefully now trimming off those excess bumps so that you have a nice, I won't say thin's the wrong word to use, but a consistent diameter of rawhide from start to finish. Clearly it's not going to be completely consistent because it's a natural material, but just removing lumps and bumps and anomalies like that. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to very carefully, without moving too much, I'd rather it remained on the thicker side than the thinner side, but just going to remove those anomalies along the length of this rawhide just by carefully trimming it down. Now that I've got the far end pegged into the ground, I'm going to take hold of this peg at this end and I'm just going to gradually twist it round, introducing naturally a twist into the rawhide material itself. When I've got a sufficient twist in it, when I think I've done a good enough job, as I've been twisting this around and around, and there's certainly a technique that you'll discover for yourself to enable you to do this fairly quickly whilst keeping the tension. I've been keeping an eye on the thickness of the cordage, if you like, from one end to the other, and it certainly varies. On some parts of it it's beautifully thick, or should I say it's beautifully tightly twisted together, looks great, looks like cordage you'd pick up and purchase from a garden store. In other areas it's slightly thicker, still looks good, but it's thicker in comparison, and that's clearly where, when I was cutting the diameter of this cordage, it was slightly thicker than in other places, and I'm coming to see what the advantage is of making sure that you keep the consistency as consistent. You keep the diameter as consistent as possible from one end to the other during that cutting. It's been interesting to note that whilst I've been twisting this, despite me keeping an even tension on it throughout, despite me having no option but to twist it in a certain direction, there are some parts of the cordage, I've placed my palm underneath it here, where it seems much thicker than other parts of the cordage where I've placed my palm underneath it here. And I strongly suspect that this is down to when I was cutting the diameter of this and trying to keep it as consistent as possible. There are naturally going to be some inconsistencies throughout the length of this, and I suspect that these thicker areas here compared to the thinner areas here as a result of that inconsistency. So I'm going to leave this pegged out in the ground now. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to shoot this part of the video at home, was so that nothing's going to come along and eat this and chew on this whilst it's out here. At least I hope it doesn't. Then when this is dried, I can come back in, I can salvage the cord, coil it up and wrap this video up. And now you join me inside Taylor Towers. Unfortunately, we've lost the light now, lost it several hours ago. So I wanted to still get this video finished off today, so I brought the camera inside into the man cave. How did it go then? Well, there we are. There's the finished product. Just over 7 feet of rawhide cordage. I left it out in the garden until we started to lose the light. Took it off, Very, very flexible. Let me undo a little bit of it for you. Very flexible. Feels very strong. Very easy to handle, easy to knot, easy to unknot. He says, having it all knotted up in his hand. Do as I say, not as I do. So there we can see some of the cordage there. It's a good exercise. I've enjoyed doing it. Let's talk about what I learnt during this process then. Well, firstly, rawhide is bloody tough to cut. Those small nail scissors you saw me using earlier on, I persevered with them, they worked. By God, I think I've given myself arthritis for life though. Really tough to cut. There was no way I was putting my knife anywhere near it. So I used Mrs. T's best dressmaking scissors. She won't mind, I'm sure. They did the job a treat. So yeah, really, really tough to cut. Some parts of it were very easy, and then the moment it got slightly thicker in thickness, the moment it got slightly thicker, really, really tough to cut through. So that's, you know, it's worth bearing in mind if you're going to try and replicate this. Get a good sturdy cutting tool, and I wouldn't put your decent knife edge anywhere near it myself personally. So that was one thing, it's bloody tough to cut. Second thing I learned, time spent on making sure that that spiral you cut is the right width, is even, is consistent, will save you a lot of time later on, as I discovered, but it'll save you a lot of cordage later on as well, because I had to go around and I had to trim off all of those bumps and those high spots where it went from being nice and consistent to being quite chunky. I had to trim those off. That's wasted rawhide, in my opinion. That's wasted cordage. I'm going to try this again in the near future, and I'm going to be much more precise and take my time with that spiral cut that I make, because I think that will save me time tenfold further on in the process and save me a lot of cordage as well, a lot of wasted rawhide. And the final thing that I learned, when you're pulling it, when it's pegged into the ground and you're pulling it to get the tension, don't pull it too hard. Because I lost about a foot there. Thankfully it was a foot towards the end. I would have been gutted if it had snapped halfway along the cordage. So although I got 7 foot of rawhide cordage, I actually could have probably ended up with 8 foot if I hadn't have pulled it as hard. But you can see, hopefully, the thickness of that cordage. It's tough, it's strong. I can certainly see why Stephen in his article recommends this for all sorts of things, including bow drill, the cordage on the bow of the bow drill. He uses it for backing bows, he uses it for bow strings. I can very definitely see why. So all in all, a good process, an enjoyable process. I don't think I've ever actually taken anything from an animal and processed it other than for food. I've never taken anything and actually done anything with the waste, I use the word loosely, material that's left behind. So it was bloody good to take that, although I didn't process the animal, Stephen did, to take that product, that byproduct, and actually make something useful out of it. Certainly something that I'm going to try and perfect and smarten up in the future. So now over to you. Have you ever made rawhide cordage yourself? How did you go on? Did you experience any of the same challenges, the problems that I experienced? How did you overcome them? Did you experience different problems and challenges? Do let me know in the comments below. If you've never thought about making rawhide cordage, why not? Let me know in the comments below. If it's because you didn't know how to, well, you do now, don't you? I'm also going to drop into the comments below, in the description below, a link to the Bushcraft Journal if you want to subscribe to that, and that's where I learnt about this from Stephen Lassay. And I'm also going to drop a link into Stephen's own website as well, Axe and Paddle Bushcraft, because he does interesting and very cool things and exciting things across there. Thank you to Stephen for writing the article and for giving me the rawhide as well, and thank you to Danny Reed as well for the time and effort that you put into the Bushcraft Journal. I appreciate it. I know many others will as well. If you've liked this video, if it's made you think, if it's made you smile, if it's inspired you to try something like this, please do give it a thumbs up. If you've got any comments, either in response to a question that I've just posed or generally, please do leave it in the comments below. And throughout this video there has been a subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. If this video has added value to you in some way, shape or form and you're not yet a subscriber, please do consider clicking on it. There it is, just down there, and you'll become a subscriber. Thank you as always for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.